Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review here to continue my Sleepaway Camp movie reviews. This one is the 1989 third film in the series, which, by the way, my review yesterday for the first of the sequels, Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers, I forgot to mention the subtitle, Unhappy Campers, and I noticed that when I was putting the upload onto my laptop. Anyway, I won't forget this time. This is the third film in the franchise. As I said, it's Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland. What a great poster. Look at that poster. I love it. It's fantastic. Look at this. It's wonderful. So Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland, great title, really like it. Came out in 1989, 1 year after the 1988 Sleepaway Camp 2 Unhappy Campers, and I got my copy in this set that I keep bringing up to you guys. I want to make sure that you know what's in this set because there are two different versions, one that only has 3 of the movies, this one happens to have 1, 2, 3, and what was made for Part 4, which wasn't a completed movie. I think from what I've heard, it has the Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 syndrome. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is. But I'm going to watch that one next. And then the final one, the soft reboot, ignoring the sequel's Halloween 2018 version of Return to Sleepaway Camp that I've never seen. So, Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland, where does this start at? Well, basically, I don't have to worry too much about spoiling the previous movie, like I did with my review for Part 2. I had to re-record that video like 5 times to make sure that I really made it clear that I was going to have to go into spoilers to talk about the main plot of that movie. At least spoilers for the first movie. This one's kind of the same thing. If you have not seen Part 1, then I don't recommend you watching this review, because I'm going to have to spoil some things you might like, you might not like, but it will ruin that movie, and kind of the mystery aspect of that film that was so good and made that movie for me. But that's your warning, buddy. So, just like with Sleepaway Camp 2, we follow Angela once again, who apparently was in New York City this time, and she kills a chick named Maria that was supposed to go to a camp that basically was kind of like a reality TV without the TV aspect situation. They were going to have poor kids from poor neighborhoods and rich kids from the same neighborhoods, one of each, poor and rich, from each of these places like San Francisco, New York, whatever, and they were going to bring them to this camp and really show how our differences and our circumstances really don't affect how human we are, and hopefully we can connect on that. And that's kind of a nice sentiment. That's a nice setup for a slasher movie, even more so, and I think it really paid off here, because frankly, I'd forgotten how much I liked this one. I've only seen it one time before, back in 2018, when I had a back injury and saw all of these first 3 films for the first time ever. And I gotta tell you, I like Part 3 more than Part 2. I think it's fantastic. It's a really fun time, and it really, with the same director and same writer, it really stepped into the comedy thing and really went for that Jason Voorhees Friday the 13th, late 80s narcissism that some of the slashers had started to air into in probably 85, 86, 87, somewhere in there. And I really think it does it successfully, even more so with the same writer and director compared to the previous movie. You know, and in some aspects, I think it's even more fun to watch than the original film, because the original film is kind of a murder mystery. You're looking at the suspects of who you think could be the killer. And this is more of just like Angela is killing people. Because basically, you have a cop and then you have 2 counselors who are running this place who are a husband and wife. The husband, Herman, is unforgettable. Just the weirdest dude on the planet. Creeps me out every time I watch this movie. But he and his wife go into 2 different groups, and the cop that came along too, whose son was in the previous film, he takes a group. Each of them have a group of kids they take care of, a mixture of rich and poor kids in each group. And they split up and they go camping in 3 different areas on the camp council grounds. And Angela will basically get into her first group, she'll get mad and start to kill everybody off in the group separately because of how much of a piece of shit they are. And then she'll move to the next group and say, hey, they told me I had to switch out with somebody else. This person needs to go to another group. She'll kill that person. And she'll just keep hopping from group to group. And it's really funny. Alright, Pamela Springsteen comes back to play Angela again, just like she did in Part 2. And to me, she's really grown into this role. I think she's really, really fun here. To me, this is the peak of her role. I think this is the last time she ever played Angela. I don't think she's in Part 4. But she really kills it here, and literally do. She was fun. I really enjoyed her performance. I thought she really got a kick out of the one-liners, even more so this time around than she did in Part 2. In Part 2, I really couldn't figure out what I liked and disliked about her performance as Angela. I didn't think she was always bad, but there were a couple of lines and whatnot that really didn't work for me. And Pamela did a way better job, this time around. I think the director and writer that came back for this movie did a great job really organizing what Angela would be like now, because this film takes place a year after the previous movie. And it's fun to watch. It's so fun to watch. Where do I even go from here? Let's talk about the characters. I really like so many characters in this film, and not just like, obviously like Angela and Pamela Springsteen playing her. It's other people. You have Tony, who I think is a really good guy. I think he's just genuinely a good guy. I like the redheaded girl that he's into. Herman is a weirdo, but that's a good performance of a weirdo, you know what I mean? There are beautiful women all over this. There's this one Asian lady, I think her name is Arab, I think is her gang name. She is beautiful, dude. There are so many good actors and actresses in this film that really brought something to this film, and really, they were just fun. They were fun people. They knew what they were doing. There's this one guy who loves rap music. He is from like kind of a ghetto area, and he loves blasting his music as loud as he can. He always has headphones on, and people will tell him to do things, and he'll just pull a gun on them, or like a knife, and he'll just threaten them immediately. I love it. That kind of humor works so well in this film, and blending the rich kids and the poor kids together was super funny. I love the jokes. There's a character in here named Snowball. He reminds me of an old friend of mine who has bleach blonde hair. This guy, Snowball, and my friend have bleach blonde hair, and it's hilarious. I love it. I love the characters in this movie. They are so much more fun to watch, whether they're the cannon fodder, let's kill them off, or whether they be the fun, like people you're actually rooting for to not be killed characters in this movie. I liked all of them. I thought they had a really good thing going for most of them. Even the bad ones, like performance-wise or the writing or anything like that, they're not really in the forefront enough to really focus on, but they are in the background to kind of bring the movie down just a little bit, just a tad bit. There's somebody outside blasting bass music, like really loud. Gotta love them. Assholes. So, moving along to the shots of the film, the cinematography, whatever you'd like to call it, I think it looks better than Part 2. Not as good as Part 1, but better than Part 2 for sure. I think they really grew as a director, as a writer. The guys working on this film behind the camera really did great as a crew. It feels better in almost every aspect. It feels more broad in almost every aspect. It feels, personally, more creative than Part 2. I think they really grew into their boots here and really knew what they needed to do to really succeed better. They knew that campiness worked. They knew that in Part 2, but they really knew how to make it work better for this movie, for this weird, at this current point, 3-film franchise. I think they really landed it here, man. And again, the writing, I think with the jokes and everything, they hit even better than Part 2's. The comedy, the jokes, the writing, the cleverness, the performances of those things really land better here, which is shockingly great, and I love it even more this time around watching it. Let's talk about the practical effects. That's the next thing on my list here. Practical effects are not as good here as they were in Part 1 and kind of Part 2. Part 2 had some better things, like the two drug addict sisters getting burnt alive. There were things like that in there that were really fun. Here you have creative kills, but most of them are cutaways from the things that you should be able to see, which is surprising, because we were heading into the 90s, and the 90s were not the sleekest thing. I mean, you had Scream, you had I Know What You Did Last Summer, where they really didn't have that many great kills in them. Mostly just stabbings or shootings or anything like that. But the 90s wasn't just like an anti-gore type of era. People tend to forget that. People tend to forget that. Yeah, it wasn't as common, but I remember distinctly seeing a lot of things in the 90s when I was a kid that I probably shouldn't have seen in movies that we rented and whatever, that were pretty horrifically gory. And it's surprising to me that they would... My whole house is shaking from this asshole's bass. Can you please fuck off? Sorry, it's just annoying, you know? I know it's got to be bothering you guys too in the background. So, that was aggressive. I'm sorry. But I don't know, I think the practical effects aren't as good here. But again, the setup for those kills clearly were supposed to be more graphic looking. Something you'd actually see, but the I assume they were told they had to cut away from the ratings board and whatever, which is a shame. It kind of ruins this movie a little bit. It doesn't have that oomph and that impact that you really want from a lot of slasher movies. So just be wary of that if you're looking out for that more in this movie. You're not really going to get it compared to even Part 2, which I think is a lesser movie than this movie was. Even though that's a good film, it's fun to watch. It's not as watchable as Teenage Wasteland, in my personal opinion. Let's talk about the music. There's not as much music in here as Part 2 and Part 1. Part 1 has a theme song to me that to me is the definitive Sleepaway Camp song. I talked about that in my previous couple of reviews. Part 2 has good music kind of spread throughout it, but once again it's kind of in the background, but I love that main Sleepaway Camp 2 theme song. That's really good. 3 kind of has that as well, but you really don't have actual music aside from the hip-hop beats on a radio. you have that in the background, but most of the film is not the late 80s rock song that I love in the opening credits and in the final portion of the film in the end credits. I love that song. I think it's fantastic menu music when I had the DVD in. So that stuff is good. It's just not really as present as well, which is a shame because it was also a good new song. It wasn't just a repeat of the last two movies' theme songs, if you want to say each of them have their own individual theme songs or whatever. But overall, Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland, I almost forgot the subtitle again, it's good. I like it a lot. I thought it was really fun, and again, I had a better time watching this time around than I did yesterday watching Part 2. I thought it had a lot going for it. It's really enjoyable, really over the top, but I wish the kills were more on screen. I really wish they were. There's one in particular involving a tree, and a guy being tied up at the tree, that could have been fucking genius for a 1980s, late 80s for that matter, kill. A lot of these kills seem like they'd be something Jason Voorhees would do, and they are super fun. But again, the cleverness behind this, the subtlety behind a lot of it, the references to the previous 2 films, it's really good. It doesn't just ignore Part 2 and act like it never happened. It really kind of throws references back to that and to Part 1. And that's what I loved about that. For the longest time, I think a lot of people would agree, you could call this one of the greatest horror trilogies ever. Ever. Like the original 3 Halloween films before we had 4 and 5 and so on and so on. This is a great flick. It really is, and I really recommend it if you haven't seen it. If you were disappointed in Part 2, there are parts to be disappointed in here, but overall I think it's a way better film in concept, with Angela going from camp to camp to camp. That was super fun. That was a blast, and I really enjoyed it. Her performance was better. Most people's performance in here were really fun and just had that perfect edge to it that I liked. The jokes were great. It's a good little horror comedy to watch. When it comes to Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland, I like it more than Part 2, as I said earlier. I think it's a better film overall, and it's more fun. It just knows what it is. It knows what it wants to be. And the next thing having to move to, which is Part 4, I'm curious how that's going to go. I've never seen it. I'm very curious about the things I've heard about it, and we'll see. So, Teenage Wasteland. If I had to give this one a 5-star rating somewhere in that list, I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5, if I'm being honest with you. It's about the same rating I gave Part 1. I think this is a great flick, something that really is overlooked in the horror fandom of slashers and whatever. I think this is really overlooked in my opinion. To me, Sleepaway Camp is typically so good in quality that it deserves to be held up higher, up there with, like, what's something I would compare it to? Like, to me, I like these way more than Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I just reviewed that series. I love these way more. I think these are way better. Way better. No question asked about it. They just have a better feel to it. That summertime camp is still very Goosebumps-like, with a murder mystery, Fear Street twist thrown in there. All these things that were not around, I assume, when this was happening and being released. This is so fun. Yeah, these are low-budget slashers. They don't look like Friday the 13th. They don't look like Nightmare on Elm Street. They don't have that quality of budget. But all 3 of them have been really fun and really enjoyable, and I like them a lot. So I recommend it. Have you seen Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland? Put your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to hear what you have to say about it. And I have 2 more reviews, and then I'll rank all of the movies, as I keep telling you. So, thank you for watching, guys. God bless you all, and goodbye.